The bridge of the Valkyrian was silent, save for the soft hum of the ship's systems and the distant crackle of failing comms. The Dominion fleet had won the battle, but every officer on board knew the real fight had just begun. Kyle stood near the viewport, his gaze locked on the ghostly warship. The Eclipse Requiem drifted among the debris, untouched, unchallenged. There were no life signs, no transmissions, just the slow, deliberate pulses of its eerie blue light. Soren swallowed hard. "Sir, I don't think we should be anywhere near that thing." Kyle didn't look away. "We don't have a choice. That ship turned the tide of this battle. If it's an ally, we need to know. If it's a threat..." He exhaled. "We need to know that too." He turned sharply. "Prepare a shuttle. I'm boarding it." A murmur rippled through the bridge. Soren looked at him as if he'd lost his mind. "Captain, that's suicide. We don't know what it is." Kyle's expression was unreadable. "That's exactly why I need to go." Soren hesitated, then nodded. "I'll have a squad suit up." Kyle shook his head. "Just me." She took a step closer, lowering her voice. "Sir, if this is about proving something, you don't have to—" "It's not about that." His voice was firm, but there was an edge of something else. Obsession. Soren clenched her jaw but said nothing more. The order had been given. Minutes later, the airlock hissed as Kyle stepped into the shuttle. As the Valkyrian shrank behind him, the Eclipse Requiem loomed ahead, waiting, as if it had been expecting him. The shuttle's thrusters fired in short bursts as Kale maneuvered toward the Eclipse Requiem. The closer he got, the more unnatural it felt, like the ship wasn't just floating, but watching. His comms crackled. "Captain, we're still not picking up anything on scans," Soren's voice came through, tense. "No atmosphere, no power readings, no structure that makes sense. Are you sure you want to do this?" Kyle smirked grimly. "No, but that's never stopped me before." The docking clamps extended, searching for a stable point to latch onto. The Eclipse Requiem's hull was smooth and impossibly black, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. The moment the clamps connected, Kyle's console flickered. Then a voice, fragmented, distant, and hollow, whispered through his helmet's comms. "Who comes?" Kale's breath hitched. "Soren," he said, his voice steady despite the icy grip tightening in his chest. "Tell me you heard that?" Silence. "Soren." More static. Then, just as suddenly, her voice returned, frantic. "Captain, what's happening? You disappeared from our sensors for a second." Kyle frowned. "I didn't go anywhere." But something was wrong. The light outside the shuttle had dimmed, as if the Eclipse Requiem was pulling him into some deeper void. The airlock panel beeped green, an invitation. The ship was letting him in. He exhaled slowly. "I'm going in." The hatch opened with a groan, revealing darkness beyond. The dim glow from Kyle's helmet light barely illuminated the corridor inside, but one thing was certain. This ship wasn't abandoned. Something else was here. Kyle stepped into the Eclipse Requiem, his boots making no sound against the impossibly smooth floor. The air inside was thick, not with atmosphere, but with something unseen, something that pressed against his senses like a weight. The moment the airlock sealed behind him, his helmet display flickered, glitching erratically before stabilizing. "Soren, do you copy?" he said into the comm. Silence. A faint blue glow pulsed along the corridor walls, shifting as though responding to his presence. The architecture was alien, fluid and seamless, without bolts or seams. It was unlike any Dominion or Akaran design. Kale's breathing was steady, but his instincts screamed at him. This ship wanted him here. He moved forward, pulse rifle raised, The passageway twisted in ways that made no sense, leading him deeper without clear direction. His suit sensors remained useless, feeding him unreadable data. Then, he saw them. Silhouettes, standing motionless in the dim light. Figures clad in ancient Dominion uniforms, their faces obscured by cracked visors. The insignias on their chests were outdated by centuries. Kyle's grip tightened on his weapon. "Identify yourselves." No response, no movement. His heart pounded. These weren't just any soldiers. They were crew from the Requiem's last recorded mission, one that was supposed to have ended in disaster centuries ago. One of the figures turned its head toward him, slow and deliberate. Its visor, dark and shattered, reflected Cale's own face. Then, in a voice that was not entirely human, it spoke. "You were not meant to find us." The lights in the corridor flickered. Kyle took a step back. "Who are you?" he demanded. The figure took a step forward. "We were the first. The forgotten. And now—" A low hum filled the air as the walls themselves seemed to breathe. "You will understand." The corridor behind Kyle twisted, shifting like a living thing, closing off his escape. The Eclipse Requiem had him now. And it wasn't letting go. Kyle's fingers hovered over the trigger of his pulse rifle, but he didn't fire. Not yet. The figures before him stood still, their cracked visors concealing whatever lay beneath. The ship pulsed again, a slow, rhythmic thrum, as if it had a heartbeat of its own. "You were the first," Kyle repeated, keeping his voice even. "The first what?" The nearest figure took another step forward, its movements eerily smooth, almost too fluid to be human. The dim glow of the ship's walls cast strange shadows over its uniform, making it look like something half-formed, caught between existence and nothingness. "We were the first to step beyond the veil, the first to see what lies between." The voice echoed strangely, as if it wasn't coming from the figure itself, but from the walls, the floor, the ship itself. Kyle's breath slowed. "You were the original crew of the Eclipse Requiem." The figure didn't respond, but Kale could feel the truth settling in his gut. The Dominion had sent out countless deep space missions in the early days of expansion. Some had vanished, lost to the void. The Requiem had been one of them, until now. But something was wrong. These men weren't dead, but they weren't alive either. Kale tightened his grip on his rifle. "What happened to you?" The figure's cracked visor reflected him again, and this time something inside the helmet moved. A shadow, writhing beneath the shattered glass. "We became part of it." A deep, crawling dread settled in Kyle's stomach. The walls shifted subtly, like they were breathing in tandem with the figures. "The ship did this to you." The figure tilted its head. "It is not a ship. It is a doorway, a threshold to what should not be seen." Kyle's mind raced. The Dominion thought the Requiem had been just another lost warship. But what if it had found something? Something beyond space? Beyond time? A cold realization settled over him. "Where did you go?" he asked. The ship trembled, as if in response. The figures took another step forward. "We went beyond, and now so have you." Behind him, the corridor collapsed into darkness. Kyle had no way back, and something was waking up. A deep vibration rumbled through the floor beneath Kyle's boots, resonating in his bones. The dim blue light pulsing through the walls quickened, like a heartbeat responding to rising adrenaline. The air, or whatever passed for it inside the Eclipse Requiem, grew thick, heavy, pressing in on him. The figures before him did not move. They simply watched, or rather, waited. Kyle steadied his breath. Panic wouldn't help. His options were limited, but he needed answers before he even thought about escape. "You went beyond," he said, voice firm despite the icy fear gnawing at the edges of his mind. "Beyond where?" The figure closest to him cocked its head at an unnatural angle. "The void between the stars, the spaces where time is not bound, where thought and being are one." Kyle's pulse hammered. He had heard of theoretical voids, pockets of reality where physics broke down, where ships disappeared without explanation. But they had always been dismissed as anomalies, superstitions. Except the eclipse requiem had returned. He took a slow step forward, testing their reaction. The figures remained still, but the ship itself seemed to shift in response, the walls rippling like disturbed water. "If you went beyond," Kyle said, keeping his voice level, "why come back?" Silence. Then, the central figure raised a gloved hand. The cracked visor distorted the movement, as though space itself was bending around it. "We did not return. The Dominion called us back." Kyle froze. That wasn't possible. The Dominion had written off the Requiem as a lost vessel centuries ago. There had been no rescue attempt, no distress signal, no mission to retrieve it. Unless... He clenched his jaw. "You're lying." The figure took a slow step closer. The others moved with it in perfect unison, like extensions of the same being. "We hear the voices of those who command your fleets. They seek power, control. They called for a weapon." Kale's stomach dropped. Arcos. She had been obsessed with finding lost Dominion technology, anything to turn the tide of war against the Akarans. If she had known about the Eclipse Requiem, if she had found a way to summon it back, then she had no idea what she was dealing with. Or worse. She did. The pulsing glow around him darkened. A low, guttural sound echoed through the corridors, something ancient and immense shifting deep within the ship. The figures spoke in unison. "Now, the door has been opened, and it cannot be closed." Kyle's breath hitched. The Requiem wasn't just a ship. It was a doorway, and something was coming through. The ship shuddered, the walls rippling as if they were alive. The pulsing glow intensified, spreading like veins of light through the floor and ceiling. Kyle braced himself as a deep, resonant hum filled the air, vibrating through his very bones. "The door has been opened," the figures whispered again, their voices overlapping in an eerie chorus. Kyle gritted his teeth. He didn't know what the hell was on the other side of that door, but he was damn sure the Dominion had no business messing with it. He lifted his pulse rifle. "Tell me how to stop it." The figures didn't react. Instead, the ship answered for them. A rift tore open at the far end of the corridor, jagged, writhing, a void darker than space itself. It wasn't just the absence of light, it was nothingness, a wound in reality that bled a sickly, shifting glow. Kyle's mind recoiled at the sight of it, his instincts screaming that he was looking at something that should not exist. From within the rift, a shape began to emerge. It wasn't Akaran, it wasn't human, it wasn't anything that had a name. It was vast, its form shifting between geometries that defied logic, as if it was trying to be something comprehensible but failing. Its presence pressed against Kale's mind, filling his thoughts with fragmented whispers, half-formed ideas, ancient hunger, an overwhelming sense of inevitability. "It is awake." The figures turned toward the rift, falling to their knees as if in reverence. Kyle's heart pounded. This was no weapon. This was something older, something worse. The Dominion had called for power. They had summoned this, and now it was coming through. Kyle's fingers moved before he could think. He activated his suit's emergency transmitter, a direct high-priority signal to the Valkyrian. "Soren," he barked, Tell the fleet to pull back, now. Static. The ship's pulse quickened. The walls trembled. The thing in the rift moved, stretching, unfolding. Kyle had one choice. He had to stop it before it fully crossed over. And that meant destroying the Eclipse Requiem. He turned, sprinting back toward the airlock, his mind racing for a way to overload the ship's core. Behind him, the figures whispered in unison. You cannot stop what has begun. Kyle ignored them. He wasn't going to let this thing escape. Not while he was still breathing. Pain. It was the first thing Kyle felt. A deep, burning ache in his limbs, his chest, his skull. His body was weightless, drifting. His eyes flickered open to a blurred haze of red warning lights. His helmet visor was cracked, the oxygen levels in his suit dangerously low. He was alive. Barely. His fingers twitched against the metal plating beneath him, not the organic shifting walls of the Eclipse Requiem. Valkyrian. He was back. A voice cut through the ringing in his ears. Captain! Kyle, can you hear me? Soren. He tried to respond, but his throat was raw, his body still reeling from whatever had happened. A sharp hiss filled his ears as his helmet's auto-repair system kicked in, stabilizing his suit's pressure. Med team, get in there! Soren's voice snapped. We've got him! Hands gripped his shoulders, hauling him up. His vision swam, but he caught sight of the Valkyrian's med bay. Bright, sterile, real. Not the pulsing nightmare of the Requiem. The Requiem. His breath hitched as it all came back. The ship, the rift, the thing trying to come through. He forced out a hoarse whisper. Did we do it? Soren leaned over him, her expression tight. It's gone. The Eclipse Requiem just vanished. No debris, no radiation. It's like it was never there. She hesitated. And the rift? Kyle's heart pounded. Tell me it's closed. Soren exhaled, nodding. Yeah, whatever you did, it worked. It collapsed in on itself. Relief washed over him, but it was hollow. The weight in his chest told him it wasn't over. Something had been waiting beyond that rift for centuries. Something vast, hungry, and for one brief, terrifying moment, it had almost broken through. Soren studied him, concern flickering in her eyes. What the hell was that ship, Kale? He swallowed hard. A warning. She frowned. From who? Kale exhaled. From whatever's still out there. The room fell into silence. Outside the Valkyrian's reinforced viewport, the Orion expanse stretched into infinity. Vast, empty, indifferent. But Kale knew better. It wasn't empty. And one day the Requiem might return. Or worse, something else would. The universe was old. Stars had burned for billions of years. Civilizations had risen and fallen, and countless empires had etched their names into the fabric of time. But when they looked at Earth, they saw a species that had barely crawled out of its cradle. To them, we were young, naive, and primitive. They had no idea we were the elders. It started with the arrival of the Vasun, a highly advanced interstellar race that saw themselves as galactic peacekeepers. Their ships, sleek and silver, descended into Earth's orbit like celestial gods coming to bless a new species. They broadcasted their message in every language. Humans, we are the Vasun. We bring knowledge, technology, and enlightenment. You have much to learn. At first we listened. The world's leaders gathered, eager to welcome these visitors who promised an age of prosperity. They spoke of how their civilizations had flourished for millions of years, how they had mapped the universe, studied the cosmos, and unlocked the secrets of life itself. They believed we were still finding our place in the stars. They didn't know. They didn't see the scars written in our history, the eons of war, the rise and fall of empires, the countless lessons etched into our DNA. We had forgotten more than most species would ever learn. When the Vasoon began offering guidance, we played along. They taught us their philosophies, their science, their technology, believing we were finally joining the cosmic stage. They showed us energy manipulation beyond our comprehension, warp technology that defied physics, and medicine that could cure any disease. But they didn't understand the truth. They didn't understand why we weren't in awe. They mistook our silence for ignorance. Then came the mistake, the moment everything changed. A Vasoon delegation visited Earth's museums. They saw artifacts from civilizations thousands of years old, ancient ruins, primitive tools, skeletal remains of forgotten ancestors. And they laughed. "Your history is barely a whisper. Your species is still crawling," one of them had said. And that was when we showed them the ruins. Not just the pyramids, not just the Mayan temples, not just the forgotten cities buried beneath sand and jungle. We took them deeper, beneath the earth itself. We showed them structures that predated humanity, architecture built by hands that history had erased, machines buried in stone that no scientist could explain. We showed them the remnants of lost ages, hints of civilizations that had risen and fallen long before recorded time. And then we told them. We told them about the cycles, that humanity had not merely risen once, but many times, that we had reached the stars before, conquered the void, built empires among the galaxies, and then vanished. We told them about the wars that had shattered entire star systems, about the knowledge that had been lost and rediscovered over and over again. We told them that Earth was not our first home, it was our last. The Vasoon went silent. They scanned our planet again, not just its surface, but its deepest layers. Their technology searched through mountains, oceans, and underground caverns, and they found them, the echoes of lost ages, the remains of civilizations so old they defied comprehension. And then they realized. We were not young. We were old. Older than them. Older than most of the galactic races they knew. They had come to teach us. But they were the ones who had something to learn. And when the others came, the true predators of the stars, the ones who saw all new species as prey, humanity was not afraid. We remembered. We always remembered. And this time, we would not fall. This time, we would teach the galaxy what it meant to awaken the elders. The Vasoon delegation left Earth in silence. Their once condescending demeanor had vanished, replaced by a quiet, almost fearful respect. They had come expecting to uplift a young species, but they left with the unsettling realization that they had just awakened something far older than they had imagined. And word spread. Other galactic races soon turned their eyes toward Earth. Some came with curiosity, eager to learn from this so-called ancient species. Others, however, saw an opportunity. If humanity had truly been powerful once, then surely they had fallen for a reason. If Earth was the graveyard of past civilizations, then perhaps it was also ripe for conquest. They had no idea what they were walking into. The first test came just a year after the Vasoon revelation. The Zelthar Dominion, a war-hardened empire that had conquered dozens of worlds, saw Earth as weak. The galaxy's whispers of ancient humans meant nothing to them. Words were not weapons. They saw a planet without interstellar fleets, without planetary defenses, without warships patrolling its skies. To them, humanity was a relic, a species clinging to old stories, nothing more. So they invaded. They came in towering warships, each one bristling with enough firepower to reduce continents to ash. They entered Earth's orbit unchallenged, broadcasting their demands in a dozen languages. Surrender, serve, or be erased. For a moment the world held its breath, and then we responded. It wasn't with diplomacy, It wasn't with desperation, it was with laughter. They had come thinking we were weak. But the truth was, we had simply been patient. The skies above Earth lit up with fire. Hidden within the depths of our oceans, buried beneath mountains, and concealed within the void of space itself, our true weapons came to life. Technologies long thought lost roared back to existence. Massive cannons, powered by energies that should not exist in a young species, tore through Zelthar warships like paper. Orbital defenses, remnants of an era long before this one, activated with cold, mechanical precision. The Earth itself seemed to fight back, as if it had been waiting for this moment. And then the ground forces landed. Zelthar soldiers, towering insectoid creatures clad in unbreakable exoskeletons, expected resistance. They expected desperate gunfire, makeshift defenses, primitive attempts at defiance. They did not expect the cities themselves to become weapons. The moment they touched the ground, ancient machines hidden beneath the streets awoke. Walls reshaped themselves into barriers, streets cracked open to reveal hidden artillery, and entire buildings shifted into armored fortresses. They had no idea how many times we had fought this war before. They had no idea we had designed our world to fight back. The battle lasted 3 days. On the 4th, the Zelthar fleet burned in the sky, their flagship torn in half. Their invasion force was no more. The few who survived were allowed to leave, not as victors, not even as equals, but as messengers. Messengers who would spread one undeniable truth across the stars. Humanity was not to be underestimated. We were not young. We were the ones who had come before, and this time we would not fade away. The Zelthar fled, their shattered fleet limping back into deep space, their empire forever changed by the horror they had unleashed upon themselves. The message was clear. Earth was not to be touched, but in the void beyond, the stars whispered. Other empires watched, calculating, weighing their options. Humanity had survived an invasion, but surviving was not the same as thriving. The galactic elite had seen countless species rise, fight, and eventually break under the weight of sustained war. To them, this was a test of endurance. They had no idea we had done this before, and we would do it again. For the next 3 years, the universe held its breath. No empire dared to strike openly, but we were not naive. The whispers of hidden plots, of spies and sabotage, reached our ears. Some species sought alliances, some sought control, and others simply wanted to know the truth. Had humanity really walked the stars before? Did we truly have knowledge beyond our years? And if we did, why had we fallen? The answers lay beneath Antarctica. For decades, human archaeologists had puzzled over an impossible structure hidden deep within the ice. Satellite scans showed it was too symmetrical, too precise to be natural. But when the Vassoon had rescanned our planet, they had confirmed what we had long suspected. It was a ship. Not just any ship. An ark, a relic of a time before this era, buried beneath frozen wastelands. A remnant of a war that had erased entire galaxies from history. When we unearthed it, the truth became undeniable. The ship's systems, ancient beyond comprehension, still held records, fragmented, corrupted by time, but not lost. They told of a war against something beyond the known universe, a war that had forced humanity to retreat, to erase itself from the galactic stage, to bury its knowledge so that the enemy could never find it. We had not fallen. We had chosen to disappear. And now, with the Ark's systems awakening, the question was no longer whether humanity would return to the stars. It was whether the thing we had once fought would notice. The warning came on the 4th year. A deep space relay, a Vassoon station monitoring the outer reaches of the known galaxy, sent a final transmission before falling silent. No ships had been seen approaching. No signals had been detected, yet the station was simply gone. And then the message arrived, not in words, not in threats, but in a single ancient symbol burned into space itself, etched across the void like a scar. We knew it, we had seen it before, and we had spent countless ages hoping to never see it again. The elders of humanity had awakened, but so had our greatest enemy. The war we had once lost was coming back. This time, we would be ready. The galaxy didn't understand what was coming. To them, the Vasun station had simply vanished. A mystery, an anomaly, something to be investigated in due time. But we knew better. We had seen this before. The symbol burned into the void was older than any empire in existence, older than any civilization still standing. It was a warning, a declaration, a whisper from something that should have remained forgotten. The enemy had returned. In secret, we began preparations. Earth's governments, fractured and divided for so long, now stood united under a single purpose: survival. War was coming, and we would not fight it alone. The arc beneath Antarctica was just the beginning. Hidden across our planet, buried beneath mountains, lost beneath oceans, were the remnants of our past selves, fragments of a civilization that had once spanned the stars. The Ark's systems led us to them. Deep beneath the Himalayas, we unearthed another vault, one that had not been opened in over 100,000 years. Within it, we found what the Ark had promised: weapons. Not just guns, not just missiles, but technologies so advanced, so devastating that even the greatest galactic empires could not comprehend them. Ships built for war, sleek and black, lined in metals that defied modern understanding. Weapons that could bend space, tear through shields, and reduce planets to dust. Humanity had once been a superpower, and we were about to be one again. But the enemy was already moving. The first real attack came on the edges of the known galaxy, in a system controlled by the Ixari Confederacy. One moment, their colony world was there. The next, it was gone. Erased, as if it had never existed. No distress calls, no survivors, just empty space where an entire civilization had once stood. The Vasun panicked. For the first time in their long history, they did not have an answer. Their technology could not detect the attackers. Their fleets could not retaliate against an enemy that left no trace. But we knew. This was how it had started last time. This was why we had vanished. And this time, we would not run. The first human fleet launched 6 months later. It was a sight no other species had ever witnessed. A fleet of ships, not new, but ancient, rebuilt from the remains of a forgotten empire, powered by technology no living race could match. They were sleek, dark, almost alive in their movements, and they carried a single message to the stars. Humanity had returned. We were not the children of the galaxy. We were the last remnants of something greater. And this time, we would not be erased. The enemy finally revealed itself. A rift tore open in the fabric of space, blacker than the void itself. From within, they came, silent, formless, shifting things, existing half in reality and half outside of it. They did not speak. They did not negotiate. They consumed. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. The Vasun, the Zelthar, the Ixari, all of them sent ships, desperate to fight an enemy they did not understand. Their weapons failed. Their defenses crumbled. But humanity had faced them before. And this time, we did not come unprepared. The moment the enemy emerged, our weapons roared to life. Not lasers, not missiles, but something older, something built not to kill but to erase. The enemy faltered. For the first time in its long, endless existence, it hesitated. Because we were not like the others. We remembered. And we had returned for vengeance. The first strike was devastating. Galactic fleets burned, shattered by an enemy they could not comprehend. The Zelthar warships, their pride and arrogance still fresh from their defeat on Earth, were the first to fall. Their shields flickered, their weapons fired blindly into the void, but it was useless. The enemy did not fight conventionally. It did not rely on ships, on fleets, on physical form. It was something else entirely. A hunger, a force, something that devoured reality itself. The Zelthar died screaming. The Ixari were next, their delicate crystalline ships dissolving into nothingness as the enemy simply unmade them. No debris, no wreckage, just empty space where entire vessels had once been. The Vasun, the so-called peacekeepers of the stars, tried to flee. Their ships flickered, jumping to warp, but they never arrived at their destinations. One by one, their escape routes collapsed into blackened voids, as if the universe itself had swallowed them whole. Panic spread. The galaxy was losing, and then humanity struck back. We had been here before. We had fought this war before, but last time we had been unprepared. We had not understood the enemy. We had not known how to stop it. Now, we did. The first human warship to enter the battle was Exodus Prime, an ancient vessel, its hull reforged from metals that no living scientist could explain. It moved with impossible precision, as if space itself bent around it. It carried no conventional weapons. Instead, it wielded something far more dangerous: the echo cannon. A weapon built in another time, for another war, a weapon designed not to destroy the enemy, but to erase it from existence entirely. With a single pulse, Exodus Prime fired. The void itself rippled, and for the first time, the enemy recoiled. The attack did not just damage it, it remembered. It had faced this before. It had won last time, but now things were different, because now humanity remembered too. And this time, we would not lose. Across the battlefield, human warships emerged, not from hyperspace, not from jump points, but from hidden locations scattered across the galaxy. Forgotten strongholds buried deep within uncharted space. Humanity had never truly fallen. We had simply waited. And now, the waiting was over. The counterattack was relentless. Every human ship was a relic of the past, rebuilt, reforged, improved. Weapons that had once been abandoned were now unleashed in full force. The echo cannons struck again, tearing through the void, unraveling the enemy piece by piece. The galaxy watched in disbelief. They had thought Earth was young. They had thought humanity was just beginning. Now they saw the truth. We were the last remnants of the first Great War. We were the ones who had fought before, who had lost, who had hidden. We were not new to the stars. We were their ancestors, and this time, we would be their salvation. The battle raged for days. The enemy, once unstoppable, now faltered. It had underestimated us. It had assumed we were as weak as the others. It had believed we had forgotten. But we had spent thousands of years preparing for this. We had never forgotten. And now, for the first time in history, the enemy feared. Because humanity did not just fight wars. We ended them. The enemy was vast. It was ancient, older than the galaxies themselves. It had erased civilizations before, consuming them, devouring their histories until not even memories remained. But it had never faced something like us. We were not the strongest, not the fastest, not even the most advanced, but we endured. And that was what the enemy feared the most. The final stage of the war began in the ruins of a dead system, one whose name had been forgotten long before the first modern races had even crawled from their homeworlds. The remains of shattered planets hung in the void like gravestones, silent, lifeless. It was here that the enemy made its last stand, and it was here that we finished what had begun eons ago. The battle was unlike anything recorded in history. The enemy did not fight as others did. It did not rely on fleets, on strategy, on logic. It was a force of destruction, a presence that twisted the very fabric of space itself. But we had learned its weaknesses. We had uncovered the truths buried deep in the ruins of our lost past. The echo cannons had wounded it. The ancient warships had held the line. But it would not be enough to simply drive the enemy back. We had to erase it, and for that, we needed the final weapon. For centuries, it had been hidden beneath the surface of Mars, buried under layers of rock and dust, waiting for the moment when humanity would need it once more. It had no name. Its creators had ensured that even the memory of it had been forgotten. But the Ark had remembered, and now, so did we. The final ship, Oblivion's Wake, carried the weapon to the battlefield. It was not a bomb, not a superweapon. It was something far more dangerous. It was a reset, a construct of impossible energy, built to rewrite reality itself, to erase the enemy from existence, not just in the present, but in the past, in the future, in every timeline it had ever touched. It was the reason humanity had vanished once before, because the last time we had tried to use it, we had failed, and the cost had been everything. As Oblivion's Wake reached the battlefield, the enemy sensed it. It remembered the weapon. It screamed, not in sound, not in words, but in something deeper, something primal. The void itself trembled as it tried to stop us. Reality twisted. Stars flickered. Entire ships vanished, erased from time before they could even fire. But we were ready. Humanity's fleets formed a wall of steel and fire. Standing between the enemy and the weapon, we took the hits. We held the line. We endured. And as Oblivion's Wake reached the heart of the battlefield, the weapon activated. Light erupted, not just in space, not just in the present, but everywhere, everywhere the enemy had ever been, everywhere it had touched, corrupted, consumed. Time itself shuddered. And then, silence. The galaxy held its breath. For the first time in untold eons, the enemy was gone, not defeated, not banished, erased. No trace remained. The worlds it had consumed, restored, the civilizations it had devoured, remembered, and in the silence that followed, the truth became clear. Humanity had not just survived the war, we had won it. The galaxy changed after that. The Vasoon, the Zelthar, the Ixari, they no longer looked at us as children. They no longer saw Earth as a backwater world, a species barely stepping into the stars. They knew the truth now. We were not young, we were not new, we were the elders of the universe, the ones who had come before, and now we had returned. This time, we would not disappear. This time we would ensure that nothing like the enemy could ever rise again. This time, the galaxy would remember. And so humanity stepped forward, not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as guardians, because we remembered what the others had forgotten, that some threats never truly die, that some wars never truly end, and that next time we would be ready because humanity always endures, and we would be watching. Forever. The Galactic Council was the oldest and most powerful governing body in the known universe. It was composed of species whose civilizations had lasted for tens of thousands, even millions of years. Their technological prowess was unmatched, their wisdom infinite, at least that's what they believed. Then humanity arrived. When the first human representatives stepped onto the Council's grand hall, they were met with laughter. Not whispers, not polite chuckles, full, unrestrained laughter. The representatives of the more ancient races barely contained their amusement. Humans were a joke. Their civilization was a mere 3,000 years old at best. They had only been in space for a few centuries. They still had internal conflicts. They still struggled with disease, and they still had to use primitive cybernetics instead of organic evolution to enhance themselves. Compared to the empires that had ruled the stars for millennia, They were nothing more than children, barbarians playing at being a spacefaring race. The Darathi delegate, a tall, serpentine being with bioluminescent veins, slithered forward with a mocking smile. "And what does your fledgling species wish to contribute to the Council? Farming techniques? Perhaps some primitive metallurgy?" The chamber filled with more laughter. The human ambassador, Michael Carter, simply smiled. He had known this was coming. Humanity had read the reports, seen the arrogance of the Council races. They had been prepared for ridicule. What the Council wasn't prepared for was the truth. Michael took a step forward, his voice calm but steady. "You mock us because of our age, because we are young." He let the words hang in the air, waiting for the laughter to die down. "And yet, despite our age, we are here, standing among you. Have you ever wondered why?" The laughter faded slightly. A few of the council members exchanged glances. "You believe time grants wisdom, that the longer a civilization exists, the stronger it becomes?" Michael's eyes scanned the crowd. "But tell me, how many of your ancient empires have fallen? How many species do you now call extinct because they grew complacent? How many civilizations stagnated and faded into irrelevance?" Silence. "We are young, yes, but in that youth, we have something none of you have anymore. Drive. When we reached our moon, we went further. When we mastered spaceflight, we pushed beyond our own system. We have barely been here for a cosmic blink, and yet we have already reached the stars." Michael leaned forward, his voice darkening. "And if we have done all this in just a few thousand years, imagine what we will become in 10,000. A murmur spread through the chamber. The amusement was gone. In its place, an uncomfortable realization. The council had laughed at them. But perhaps, just perhaps, they should have been afraid. The silence that followed Michael Carter's words was thick with tension. The Galactic Council, once filled with laughter and mockery, now shifted uncomfortably. The reality was beginning to set in. Humanity wasn't just another fledgling species. They were something else entirely. The Darathi delegate, who had led the initial mockery, narrowed his glowing yellow eyes. He leaned forward, his voice laced with condescension. "Impressive rhetoric, human, but words alone do not make a species powerful. Your people have no great fleets, no planet-cracking weapons, no ancient archives of wisdom." Michael smirked. "Oh? Is that what you think?" He tapped on his wrist communicator. In an instant, a holographic display filled the council chamber. It was a star map, one that showed an alarming detail, hundreds of human colonies. The council gasped. They had expected a dozen, maybe 20 at most. But hundreds? That was impossible. The growth was too fast. Even for an expansionist race, the resources required to establish so many settlements in such a short time should have been beyond their reach. The Ralzek ambassador, a towering insectoid with razor-sharp mandibles, clicked his jaws in agitation. This cannot be correct. Your species was barely crawling out of your own system a few centuries ago." Michael nodded. "Yes, and now we are here." The hologram changed again, this time displaying the battle records of humanity, not against alien foes but against themselves. Wars that had shaped their resilience, conflicts that had pushed them to adapt, to innovate, to survive. The Great Wars, the nuclear age, the rise of artificial intelligence, the era of global conflicts and space militarization. Each one had been brutal, but each one had made humanity stronger. Your civilizations reached an age of peace so long ago that you forgot what struggle means, Michael said, his tone sharp. But we have never known peace for long. Every generation has fought for something, and that fight has forged us into something you can't comprehend. The Zalari delegate, a creature of pure energy encased in a floating crystalline shell, hummed in thought. You claim strength through suffering, but suffering often leads to destruction. How do we know your species will not burn out like so many before it? Michael's smile didn't waver. Instead, he pulled up one final piece of evidence. A simple image. It was Earth, but not just any Earth. It was Earth after the cataclysms, after nuclear disasters, asteroid impacts, climate crises, and countless self-inflicted wounds. And yet, it was still there, thriving, alive. Because no matter how much we suffer, we endure. Silence fell once again. But this time, it was different. This time, it wasn't because they were dismissing humanity. It was because, for the first time, they were beginning to understand. And they were afraid. The weight of realization settled over the chamber like a suffocating fog. The ancient races of the Galactic Council, beings who had ruled for millennia, who had seen countless civilizations rise and fall, now found themselves staring at something they had never encountered before. A species that should have been fragile. A civilization that should have been insignificant. Yet here they stood, unbroken. The Darathi delegate's tail flicked in agitation. His confidence was shaken, but his pride would not allow him to admit it. Endurance alone does not make one superior human, he sneered. You speak of survival as if it is a virtue. But tell me, what have you contributed to the universe? What wonders have you created that compare to the knowledge of the Zilari, the genetic mastery of the Yilath, the interdimensional technologies of the Vaeltari? Michael Carter didn't flinch. He had expected this. He had prepared for it. He pulled up another projection. This time it wasn't war records. It wasn't maps of human colonies. It was human invention. You claim we have contributed nothing. But in our short existence, we have done what your ancient empires have long abandoned. The holograms flickered, shifting from one breakthrough to the next. Nanotechnology capable of repairing a dying sun, cybernetic enhancements that allowed the paralyzed to walk again. Artificial intelligence that rivaled the computational power of entire planetary networks. Medical advancements that had eradicated diseases that once plagued the stars. You stopped pushing the boundaries of possibility because you had time to wait. We never had that luxury. We had to fight for every inch of progress. And because of that, we do what you deem impossible. The chamber murmured in uneasy whispers. The weight of their own stagnation was now undeniable. The Zilari ambassador's crystalline form pulsed erratically, as if disturbed. You evolved too fast, it admitted. That is unnatural. Dangerous. You are an anomaly. Michael chuckled, stepping forward. His next words sent a shiver through the council. We are not an anomaly. We are inevitable. The council had seen countless species before, but none like humanity. None that learned so quickly, none that adapted so fiercely, none that refused to die. And now, as they sat in stunned silence, they realized the truth. Humanity had arrived. And they were never leaving. The murmurs in the chamber grew louder, shifting from disbelief to something else. Concern. Fear. Even the most arrogant among the council members couldn't ignore the truth any longer. Humanity's rise wasn't a fluke. It wasn't luck. It was a force of nature. The Darathi delegate coiled his long, sinewy body, his tail thumping against the marble floor in irritation. He still wasn't ready to accept this. You expect us to believe that your kind will continue this reckless growth? That your fire will never burn out? That you will not, like so many before you, reach a peak and then crumble into dust? Michael Carter held his gaze steady. There was no anger in his expression, no arrogance, just cold certainty. That's the difference between us and those who came before, he said. They built civilizations to last forever. They thought time was on their side. They grew complacent. But we? His smile was almost predatory. We don't expect eternity. We expect struggle, and we embrace it. The chamber fell silent once more. For the first time, these ancient races were forced to see themselves through different eyes. They had ruled the stars for so long, had watched species rise and fall so many times, that they had never imagined encountering something like this, something that didn't fear time, that thrived on adversity. The Zalari ambassador's crystalline form pulsed with a deep, resonant hum. And what is it you seek, human? If not dominion, then what? Michael's smile faded, replaced with something far more dangerous: determination. We seek what we have always sought: to go further, to be better, to survive. He let the words settle before adding, "We didn't come here for permission. We came here to warn you." The chamber held its breath. Because if we've come this far in just a few thousand years, you should be asking yourselves one thing. Michael leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried through the vast chamber. What happens when we're no longer the young ones? The council members had no answer. For the first time in countless millennia, the ancient races of the galaxy had encountered a species that wasn't bound by the same rules, a species that didn't fear time, that didn't submit to stagnation, a species that would never stop. And for the first time, they realized humanity was not a joke, humanity was a warning. The chamber remained silent, the weight of Michael Carter's words settling over the gathered representatives like a suffocating shroud. These were beings who had lived through the rise and fall of empires, who had shaped the stars themselves. And yet, for the first time in countless millennia, they felt something unfamiliar: dread. The Darathoi delegate, always the first to sneer, now looked more cautious than arrogant. He flicked his forked tongue, his bioluminescent scales dimming slightly. "And if we decide," he said slowly, measuring his words carefully, "that your species is a threat to the balance of the galaxy?" Michael didn't blink. "Then I would remind you that countless others have thought the same about us." He took a step forward, locking eyes with the reptilian diplomat. "They're not here anymore." The unspoken meaning sent a ripple of unease through the chamber. Humanity had not been the dominant species on Earth when they first emerged. They had not been the strongest nor the fastest, but they had become the apex predators of their world, not through brute strength, but through sheer adaptability and persistence. Now they stood before the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy, and they were delivering a message. "We are not here to conquer," Michael continued, his voice steady. "We are not here to submit. We are here to evolve. If you stand beside us, we will share the stars. If you stand in our way—" He didn't need to finish the sentence. The Ralzek ambassador, the towering insectoid with his gleaming carapace, clacked his mandibles. "You threaten war?" Michael shook his head. "Number war is for those who seek destruction. We do not seek destruction." The holographic display behind him shifted again. This time it showed something far more terrifying than humanity's past wars. It showed projections, models of human progress, their exponential growth in technology, population, and influence. It showed a future where humanity wasn't competing with the elder species. It showed a future where humanity had surpassed them. The implications were clear. The Council could resist them. They could try to suppress them. But it wouldn't change the outcome. It would only delay the inevitable. The Zalari ambassador's crystalline form pulsed erratically, its energy fluctuating with uncertainty. "You are dangerous," it murmured, almost to itself. "Not because of violence, but because you cannot be stopped." Michael simply nodded. "You finally understand." The chamber fell into an uneasy silence once more. For thousands of years, the Galactic Council had been the ultimate authority in the known universe. They had seen civilizations come and go, had dictated the fate of entire species, and now they were being forced to recognize a new reality. Humanity wasn't here to ask for acceptance. They weren't seeking approval. They were here to claim their place, and no one, not the Darathi, not the Zeleri, not any of the ancient empires, could do a damn thing to stop them. The chamber remained heavy with tension, the realization dawning upon the gathered council like the slow death of a star. For the first time in millennia, they were no longer the undisputed masters of the cosmos. The Darathi delegate, who moments ago had mocked humanity, now looked uncertain. His glowing eyes darted across the room, searching for support from the other ambassadors. But none spoke. None dared. The silence was worse than any outburst. Michael Carter stood firm, his expression unwavering. He had said what needed to be said. Now it was time to see how these so-called wise and ancient beings would react. It was the Zalari ambassador who finally broke the silence. "You are unlike any species we have encountered before," it admitted, its crystalline shell vibrating with unreadable energy. "Your kind should not have reached this point so soon. You should not be standing here." Michael smiled, but there was no warmth in it. And yet, here we are. The insectoid Ralzek ambassador shifted uncomfortably, his mandibles clicking in agitation. "What do you want from us, human? You say you do not seek war. You claim you do not seek conquest. Then why have you come?" Michael took a deep breath. "To tell you that the galaxy is changing," he said simply. "You've lived in comfort for too long. You thought time was on your side. You thought no new power could rise and challenge you. That era is over." He let his words settle before continuing. "We will not ask for permission to exist. We will not bow to decrees made by civilizations that have long since lost the fire to evolve. We do not seek to rule you, but we will not be ruled." The Darathi's scales flared in irritation. "So you seek independence?" Michael shook his head. "We seek progress. Whether you stand with us or against us is irrelevant. We are moving forward, regardless." The council chambers had witnessed countless negotiations, treaties, and diplomatic talks over the centuries. But never had they witnessed this. A species standing before them, declaring itself not as a subject, not as a threat, but as the next chapter of history itself. And the worst part? They knew it was true. The Darathi delegate coiled his long body, his glowing eyes narrowing. "Then I suppose we have no choice but to adapt as well." Michael nodded. "That would be wise." The meeting adjourned soon after, but the echoes of it would ripple across the galaxy for generations to come. For the first time in untold millennia, the great and ancient races of the cosmos had been forced to look at themselves and acknowledge the bitter truth. They were no longer the future. Humanity was, and nothing would ever be the same again. The aftermath of the meeting reverberated across the galaxy, with a force none of the ancient races could ignore. The Galactic Council, once the ultimate authority in the universe, was now left to grapple with the weight of what had just transpired. The human delegation returned to their vessel, the Sovereign, leaving the council chambers in the midst of a storm of whispered conversations, debates, and desperate reassessments of the future. The council had not yet made its official decision, but the quiet was deafening. The representatives of the oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy couldn't escape the reality that humanity had, in the span of mere decades, become a force to be reckoned with. Inside the Sovereign's command deck, Michael Carter stood by a large viewing window, staring out into the vast expanse of stars. His mind was calm, but his thoughts were anything but. The momentary silence of the meeting was deceptive. He knew the Council would not simply accept humanity's rise with open arms. They would resist. They had to. It was the only way they knew how to deal with threats. But that resistance would come at a cost, and Michael was prepared for it. The ship's communications officer, Lieutenant Isla Reynolds, approached with a fresh report. "Sir, we've just received a message from the Veltari Senate. They want a private meeting." Michael's eyes narrowed. The Veltari were known for their interdimensional knowledge, their mastery of space-time manipulation. They were not a species easily swayed by emotion or rhetoric, and their reputation for diplomacy was almost as legendary as their technology. "Set up the meeting, but remember, this is not a negotiation. We're not asking for permission," he replied, his voice steady but resolute. Isla gave a nod, but her expression was wary. "Understood, sir, but we may be walking into a hornet's nest." "I wouldn't expect anything less," Michael muttered. As the meeting time approached, the human delegation prepared for another round of diplomatic chess, aware that this would be the real test. The Veltari had always maintained a neutral stance, but their influence was vast, and their power could tip the scales of any conflict. As the shuttle carrying the human delegates neared the Veltari capital ship, Michael stood once again at the front, gazing at the massive ship floating like a phantom in the darkness of space. Its sleek, almost ethereal design looked like it was made of pure energy, its surface shifting and undulating as if it existed outside of normal space. "This will be different," he said softly, his thoughts far ahead of the moment. "But we must be ready for it." The shuttle docked, and Michael, along with his team, stepped into the Veltari's grand hall. It was a place of quiet elegance, with walls that shimmered like liquid crystal, constantly shifting colors as if the very structure of the room was alive. At the center stood a massive table, and seated around it were the Veltari council members. The first thing Michael noticed was their eyes. They weren't like any eyes he had ever seen before. Their irises were multifaceted, shifting like prisms, reflecting and refracting the light in strange, almost hypnotic ways. The Veltari had the ability to perceive time differently from most other species, which gave them a unique perspective on the universe. The lead ambassador, a being whose body seemed to flicker in and out of phase, spoke in a voice that echoed with strange harmonics. "Humanity," it began, "you have caused a great disturbance. The balance of the galaxy has been—" "Disrupted?" Michael interjected, his voice sharp. "No, Veltari, it has been changed, and you will either adapt or you will be left behind." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, it felt like the entire universe was holding its breath. The Veltari ambassador's form shimmered, its multifaceted eyes flickering as if considering something far beyond the present moment. "You presume much for a species that has only just reached the threshold of the stars," it said slowly. "But perhaps you are right. Perhaps this galaxy, this universe, is not for the old anymore. You humans, you have something the rest of us have lost. Fire." Michael stood tall. "And that fire will burn brighter than anything you have ever known." There was no more talk of submission or conquest. This wasn't about victory or defeat. It was about evolution. "What do you want, human?" the Veltari ambassador asked, the weight of the question palpable. Michael met their gaze, steady as ever. "We want the future, and we're taking it, with or without your help." The response was silence. Then, slowly, the Veltari ambassador nodded, its form shimmering like a star fading into the dawn. "You may just have what it takes to shape it." The meeting ended soon after, but the ramifications of it would echo through the galaxy for centuries to come. The Vialtari, like all the others, had seen the truth. Humanity wasn't just a new force in the galaxy. They were the force that would redefine the galaxy. And they would no longer be ignored. The moment Michael and his team stepped back onto the Sovereign, the reality of what had just transpired weighed heavily in the air. The Vialtari, the most enigmatic and detached of the elder races, had acknowledged them. Not as a curiosity, not as an upstart species, but as an equal. That, in itself, was a victory. But it wasn't over. Not yet. As the ship's airlock sealed behind them, Isla Reynolds was already moving to her console, her face tense. "Sir, we've intercepted a transmission from the Darathi homeworld. It's encrypted, but from the message structure it looks like military orders." Michael exhaled slowly. "Let me guess. Fleet mobilization?" She nodded grimly. "Looks that way. The Darathi aren't going to sit back and watch us rise. They're preparing for something." The other officers exchanged uneasy glances. No one was surprised. If any species was going to react with hostility, it would be the Darathi. They were an empire built on dominance, on subjugation. They saw power as something to be enforced, not earned, and humanity had just shattered their illusion of superiority in front of the entire Galactic Council. "Pull up the details," Michael ordered, stepping toward the main holotable. Within seconds, a galactic map flickered into view, and bright red markers began appearing near Darathi-controlled systems. The numbers were concerning: fleet formations, troop deployments, supply lines shifting. The Darathi weren't just posturing, they were planning something real. "They're moving faster than expected," Isla muttered. "They don't want to give us time to prepare." Michael's jaw tightened. "Then we take that time ourselves?" He turned to Admiral Kovacs, the Sovereign's commanding officer. The man was a veteran of Earth's last interstellar conflicts, a seasoned strategist who had fought and won against overwhelming odds before. "Admiral, we need to send word to all human colonies. Lock down supply routes, reinforce defensive positions, and initiate silent fleet movements. We don't make the first move, but we sure as hell don't let them catch us off guard." Kovacs nodded, already sending out commands to the fleet. "And what about the Council?" Isla asked. "Some of them might intervene. The Vialtari seemed open to us, but the Ralzek and Zalari might be pressured into siding with the Darathi." Michael clenched his fists. "Then we show them exactly what happens when you push humanity into a corner." The room fell silent. Every officer present knew what that meant. Humanity had never been the first to strike, but they had never lost a war when forced to fight. And if the Darathi wanted to see what a young, hungry civilization could do when threatened, then so be it. Michael took one last look at the galactic map, at the shifting red markers that signaled the coming storm. Then he turned to his people, his voice steady. "This is what we were built for. This is why we survive. They laughed at us once. They won't be laughing for long." And as the Sovereign powered up its engines, preparing to take its place at the front lines of history, one thing became clear. The galaxy had just made its biggest mistake. It had underestimated humanity. The war began in whispers. The Darathi never made an official declaration. They didn't need to. Their fleets simply moved, first toward border colonies, then into the neutral zones, and finally toward human-occupied systems. Their military doctrine was simple: crush the enemy before they can fight back. It had worked for them for thousands of years, but they had never fought humanity. Michael Carter stood in the command center of the Sovereign, his eyes locked on the tactical display. Red markers, Darathi warships, pushed deeper into human space. But the blue markers, human fleets, weren't retreating. They were waiting. Admiral Kovacs leaned over the table, his face grim but focused. They think we'll react like every other species they've conquered, that we'll fall back, negotiate, beg. Michael smirked. Then let's teach them how wrong they are. The first engagement happened near Proxima Outpost, a small but strategically vital station guarding the inner colonies. The Durathi sent 3 battle cruisers, expecting an easy victory. They found nothing but empty space. Confused, they pushed forward, only for the human fleet to ambush them from the asteroid belt, a maneuver the Council races would have considered reckless. To humanity, it was standard tactics. The Durathi lost all 3 cruisers in under 15 minutes. It was only the beginning. The War of Misdirection. Humanity didn't fight like the ancient empires. They didn't line up in neat formations. They didn't rely on slow-moving dreadnoughts, and they sure as hell didn't throw wave after wave of troops at the enemy. They fought like they had always fought, with deception, adaptability, and overwhelming force at the right moment. Durathi convoys started vanishing in deep space. Their supply lines were disrupted by human stealth ships. Every time they thought they had cornered a human fleet, they were the ones walking into a trap. The Galactic Council watched in stunned silence as humanity, the young and inexperienced species, systematically dismantled one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. And then, something happened that changed everything. The turning point, the Battle of Orion Gate. The Durathi, desperate to regain control, launched a full-scale assault on Orion Gate, a massive relay station that linked human space to the wider galaxy. They sent an entire armada, 300 ships, enough to wipe out entire fleets. Michael Carter and Admiral Kovacs had 37. The Council watched the battle unfold in real time, convinced this would be humanity's breaking point. But they didn't understand how humans fought. They didn't understand that war, to humans, was an art. Instead of facing the Durathi head-on, the human fleet shut down all communications and powered down their ships. The Durathi approached, assuming the station had already been abandoned. That was their mistake. As soon as the Durathi armada moved into range, hidden orbital mines, planted weeks in advance, detonated across their fleet. Dozens of ships were instantly destroyed, while others were thrown into chaos. Then, humanity struck. From the dark void of space, the Sovereign and its fleet powered up in unison, launching an onslaught of coordinated missile strikes, electronic warfare, and precision assaults. The Durathi never recovered. By the time the battle was over, 250 Durathi ships were destroyed. The remaining survivors surrendered, something their species had never done before. The Council received a simple message from Michael Carter after the battle. You called us young. You called us reckless. You laughed at us. You shouldn't have. The war was no longer just a conflict. It was a reckoning. The beginning of the end. Across the galaxy, the news spread. Humanity had not only survived the Durathi onslaught, they had turned the tide. And the other ancient races? They were terrified. Because now they had to ask themselves a single, horrifying question. If humanity could do this in their infancy, what would they become in their prime? In the aftermath of Orion Gate, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The balance of power in the universe had shifted, and for the first time, humanity was at the center of it. The Durathi, humiliated and desperate, demanded immediate retaliation. Their ambassador's voice trembled with rage. We must act now. If humanity is left unchecked, they will consume this galaxy. They do not know their place. But the Vaeltari, ever the observers, responded with something that sent a cold chill through the chamber. Perhaps it is we who do not know theirs, their ambassador said, their voice echoing through the halls. The council erupted in argument. Some wanted war, some wanted to surrender. But one truth was now undeniable. Humanity wasn't just another species. They were something else, something new. Back in human space, Michael Carter knew the war wasn't over. The Darathi would never accept peace, and the rest of the council was still deciding what to do. He wouldn't give them the chance. "We end this now," he told Admiral Kovacs. "No more waiting for them to make the next move. We take the fight to them." And so, humanity did what no other species had dared to do before. They invaded an ancient empire. The Darathi homeworld, once thought untouchable, saw human warships descend from the void like predators closing in for the kill. They bypassed the Darathi's planetary defenses, not with brute force, but with ingenuity. Cyber warfare shut down their systems. Infiltration teams sabotaged their command centers. By the time the Darathi realized what was happening, it was already over. Their emperor was forced to kneel before a human delegation and sign an unconditional surrender. Humanity had done the impossible. They had defeated an elder race. When word of the Darathi's fall reached the council, the reaction was immediate. The Zalari, the Ralzek, even the once neutral Valtari, they all understood. The galaxy would never be the same. Some races chose to ally with humanity, recognizing that resistance was futile. Others withdrew, hoping to avoid conflict altogether. And some, the foolish ones, began plotting in secret, hoping to one day reclaim what they had lost. But one thing was clear: humanity had arrived, and no one was laughing anymore. Years later, long after the war had ended, a new species petitioned to join the Galactic Council. They were young, much like humanity had once been. They were greeted with skepticism, with laughter, with arrogance. But then, an old recording was played before the council, Michael Carter's final words from the Orion Gate battle. "You called us young, you called us reckless, you laughed at us, you shouldn't have." Silence followed. Because now the ancient races understood. They had once mocked humanity, and they had paid the price. The cycle would not repeat. Not again. Because the galaxy had learned its lesson. Never underestimate the humans. Never again.